from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to our Monday night edition of the program. Happy to be here. Welcome back. Hope you had a good weekend. The phone number is 833-482-5337-833-4-Valdez. And, man, could there be any more news today, right? They caught the person of interest. I think it's he's going to soon be labeled a suspect in the murder of the CEO of United Healthcare, and he's been identified. I'll get into that in a little bit. They caught him at a Mickey D's, and my question is, was it the Mickey D's that Trump was filling those French fry orders at? The one that helped put him over the top in Pennsylvania? I don't know. But what we do know about the guy is that he is a known anti-capitalist, which are usually radicals that are left-leaning. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. I want to dig in on that because that's a huge story today, here in New York City at least. The NYPD commissioner of police making a big statement about that, and we'll bring you that in a little bit. Then we've got Bashar al-Assad, the head of state over in Damascus, Syria. He's on the run. Is he with Putin? I don't know, but we're going to have former Prime Minister Liz Truss weigh in. She is going to give us her thoughts on what's going on geopolitically in the Middle East, as well as her thoughts on what's going on domestically here in the United States. She, of course, went up against the UK version of the swamp that they call the Blob. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And, of course, the big story of the day, again, breaking this afternoon, the story of Daniel Penny. Now, you might remember, this is a Marine veteran who was on the subway, witnessed somebody being very belligerent, then becoming hostile with several people on the subway car, and subdued the guy, put him in a sleeper hold to subdue him until police came, handed him over to police, and I guess EMS at that time, with a pulse, and the guy eventually dies. Now, the guy has a sordid past, which, you know me. My take on these things has always been, I'll judge you for the crime at hand, not 87 crimes prior. And the reason why is because it taints the crime at hand, right? Now, I get it. If you get that information, you don't want to just dismiss it. But I tend not to focus on it, all right? Whether it's George Floyd and his holding a pregnant woman at gunpoint, it can lead you to think, maybe I can be a little less sympathetic towards this guy because he's such a scumbag. And I don't want to be that guy, right? I'd much rather say he was a scumbag the other day, granted, but right now we're talking about this day, the passing of the counterfeit bill and the resisting of arrest, right? That was the George Floyd thing. So same thing here with this Mr. Neely. Now, I know this Neely here had a history of kidnapping a 7-year-old girl and assaulting 2 senior citizens in their 60s. But I don't want to use that against him here because, again, in that moment, Mr. Penny, that was unbeknownst to him, right? He just did what he thought was right in that moment for the citizens that were on that train, having to, come to their rescue. This is an American hero, this man, an innocent American hero that saw something and did something. And I think we can all say that America would be a better place today if there were more people like Daniel Penny, right? But today, we got the follow-up to the news we shared just before the weekend that the judge had thrown out one of the charges because the jury kept getting hung on it, and they said, let's focus on the criminally negligent homicide aspect of the case as opposed to the manslaughter, I think second-degree manslaughter, which is the one that they threw out. And we've got a report on this story, and I want you to hear it. Listen to this.
Daniel Penny has been found not guilty of criminal negligent homicide. And now that we have this verdict in, there are a lot of angry people out here. The jury deliberated last week. We know that Friday, the judge dismissed the manslaughter charge. The jury was asked to reconvene today to focus over the weekend on that lesser charge of criminal negligent homicide, which they did and have found that verdict. We know the jury, made up of 7 men and 5 women, came together here to find Daniel Penny not guilty of that charge, which carries up to 4 years in prison. But of course, outside the courtroom here, there have been protesters and counter-protesters here all morning and all week, and many people upset about this verdict.
And I think many people are happy about this verdict. The way the news comes nowadays, it's really just, it's always packaged one way or the other. Anyway, that's ABC News correspondent Stephanie Romas. And again, yeah, that's the truth. Daniel Penny's not guilty. And we're scheduled to have a conversation with his attorney as we get closer to that. I'll keep you updated. But this, I think, was the system working, right? As you'll recall, this gentleman, Mr. Penny, was investigated and kind of let go. They said, no, we've chosen not to prosecute because it looked like a self-defense, open and shut type of thing. And it wasn't until the political powers that be made some noise and said, this doesn't look good. We need a pound of flesh. This is a black man on the subway being killed by a white man. It doesn't look good. And we've got to take action. And there are people that are upset about that, like Hawk Newsom. Hawk Newsom is a loudmouth BLM person who is out of New York, and here's what he had to say.
We need some black vigilantes.
That's right.
People want to jump up and choke us and kill us for being loud. How about we do the same when they attempt to oppress us?
Right.
I'm tired.
He's tired, folks. Hawk Newsom's tired. I got to tell you, I don't know. Obviously, this is a large man. I can't trust him as far as I can throw him. But my question for him really is, does he even believe the stuff he's saying? Does he really want black vigilantes? Does he want any vigilantes? Was Daniel Penny being a vigilante? I don't think he was being he wasn't seeking revenge. He was, doing the right thing. He wasn't taking the law into his own hands. He was taking the safety of the people next to him into his own hands. Something he was trained to do. Anyway, I failed to see it that way. Whether the shoe's on the other foot or not. And it's been on the other foot many times. And I don't think anybody, at least that I know and agree with, has never called for violence. Anyway, folks, we have Prime Minister Liz Truss coming up. We're going to talk about domestic policy, her new book, a new film that she's got, plus what's going on with Bashar al-Assad. All of that's coming up next with me, live, Rich Valdez, here with you straight till 1 a.m. And after that, your calls, 833-482-5337.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
This is a historic day for the Middle East. The collapse of the Assad regime, the tyranny in Damascus, offers great opportunity, but also is fraught with significant dangers. This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters. It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its oppression. But it also means we have to take action against possible threats. One of them is the collapse of the Separation of Forces Agreement from 1974 between Israel and Syria. This agreement held for 50 years. Last night it collapsed. The Syrian army abandoned its positions. We gave the Israeli army the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel. This is a temporary defensive position until a suitable arrangement is found. Equally, we send a hand of peace to all those beyond our border in Syria, to the Druze, to the Kurds, to the Christians, and to the Muslims who want to live in peace with Israel. We're going to follow events very carefully. If we can establish neighborly relations and a peaceful relations with the new forces emerging in Syria, that's our desire. But if we do not, we'll do whatever it takes to defend the state of Israel and the border of Israel.
That, of course, is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel talking about what happened over the weekend in Syria with the collapse of the Assad regime, making his position very, very clear. I want to get the reaction of another prime minister, former Prime Minister Liz Truss of the United Kingdom. She's got a new movie coming out, The Prime Minister Against the Blob, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But right now, I want to get a bit of her reaction to what's going on internationally and getting the geopolitical picture from her. Madam Prime Minister, welcome.
Great to be on the show.
So when you heard this clip, I'm not sure if you've heard it before or not, but when you're hearing it now, what's your gut reaction to Assad tucking tail and just wrapping things up? This is, I think, for some a surprise, for others not. Where do you stand on that?
Well, clearly he was an appalling dictator and had wrought incredible damage on the Syrian people. We also face an uncertain future for Syria and the rise of Islamist forces as well. So in neither side of this battle can we really see those who are on our side. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing the Lord's work in the Middle East. He is defending the frontiers of the West, and I think he deserves all our support. But we don't know, as he rightly says, what is going to emerge. I fear we could see another caliphate emerge, which is a terrible danger to the forces of the West as well. But nobody will mourn the departure of Assad.
I guess a follow-up to that is when we saw similar happen, right? We're seeing images of the statue of Assad being toppled by the people. And for many Americans, I think they think, man, great, right on. This is fantastic. But for others, it's reminiscent of Saddam Hussein's stuff being toppled or what we've seen in the Maidan Square and people saying this is the U.S. meddling yet again. And I don't know one way or the other. I do know nothing good came out of Syria, and I'm hoping, like you said, this doesn't become worse. Do you think we're on a path to making things better, or are things about to get worse?
It's hard to say. There's no doubt that this is very bad news for Russia and Iran, who are part of the axis of aggression that has done so much damage to the West. So there's no doubt this is very bad news for them. However, we do see the rise of Islamism, which I'm particularly concerned about. We don't just see that in the Middle East, but also in Europe. Here in the United Kingdom, 4 Islamist MPs have been elected to the Houses of Parliament. So that is a real threat as well. The answer really is we want neither of these forces to win.
So how do you mitigate a circumstance like this? Because, it's happening all over the West, right? There's a massive immigration. There's massive movements. And like you said, we want to avoid a caliphate, but can we?
Well, we absolutely can. And why are we in this position now? It's because of a weak West. It's because we have allowed these Islamist forces into our own countries. It's because we haven't stood up for our values enough. It's because of our economic weakness. If you look at what Joe Biden has done appeasing Iran, taking the sanctions off Iran, allowing them to make vast amounts of money through oil and gas wealth, which they have used to fund their proxies to attack Israel. So this is the destabilization we're seeing in the Middle East is a direct result of failed policies, particularly by Biden, but by the West overall.
So when and I love the response, I think that's encouraging. But when we look at something like that and we think, okay, great, this is a little bit of a setback for Russia and Iran. Like I agree with you, this is the modern day axis of evil that's every day or every other day mentioned as the nexus for the next potential world war. Do you think that ouster, if you will, of Joe Biden from the White House, the incoming administration of Donald Trump, this weakening of Assad. Does this bode well for peace down the road, or am I being too optimistic?
Well, there's no doubt that Donald Trump's election is positive for the strength of the United States, the strength of the West, the projection of strength towards our adversaries. We're already seeing the reaction from Russia, from China, from Europe, in fact. And I thought the scenes at Notre Dame really captured that over the weekend. So people know America is back. They know they've got an American president who is going to show strength. He's not going to appease aggressors. He is prepared to take action where required. He's also prepared to do things like put up tariffs towards our adversaries like China. I think these are all very important tools that President Trump can use. So I'm optimistic that things are headed in the right direction, but I'm very, very concerned about the weakness of Europe because we have not caught up with what's happening in the United States. We're not spending enough on our defense. Our economies are in a dreadful state because of climate extremism, all kinds of nonsense, massive government spending. So we are in a difficult position. And what I want to see, and this is what I wrote about in my book, 10 Years to Save the West, is I want to see similar strength shown by Europe as has been shown by President Trump and the American people.
Folks, again, we are on with former Prime Minister Liz Truss of the United Kingdom. She is the author of the aforementioned 10 Years to Save the West. And I love the title of the book because, man, we need to save the West, right? There was a time when the West was leading the way. And now in my opinion, I'm only 46, but in the years I've been alive, it seems like we're becoming weaker and weaker. Would you agree?
I agree. And it is the last 30 or 40 years where we have shown weakness. After the end of the Cold War, I think the West was incredibly complacent. We thought we'd won, we defeated the Soviet Union, and we allowed China to join the World Trade Organization. They have eaten our breakfast, lunch, and dinner. As a result, Russia was appeased, even though there was invasions into Crimea, into the Donbass region. Nothing was done. That was mainly under President Obama. Iran has been appeased as well, and we are in a situation where they almost have a nuclear weapon. And if we think the Middle East is scary now, can you imagine what a nuclear-armed Iran would look like and what they would do? So the West has been caught napping. We haven't done enough to boost our economies. The American economy is in a much healthier state than the European economies, which are on the verge of going bust. That's how bad it is. So that is what my book is about. It's about how we need to take a completely different tack. We need to dismantle the bureaucratic state that has been running our countries into the ground. We need to take on these ideologies like Islamism, wokeism, eco-extremism. And we need to be proud of what our countries have delivered to the world and start doing it again.
Amigos, we are on with former Prime Minister Liz Truss of the United Kingdom. She's got this amazing book, 10 Years to Save the West. She's also the subject of a new documentary, The Prime Minister Against the Blob. That's kind of like the president against the swamp. We're going to get into that as well. I want to get your thoughts on some domestic policy, on immigration, as well as learning all about the film and so much more. Keep it locked right here, folks. We're coming right back. I'm Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez. We continue our conversation with Prime Minister Liz Truss, discussing her book, 10 Years to Save the West, as well as an upcoming film that is coming out about her, the Prime Minister versus the Blob. And we're going to talk about that and the similarities that it has to the swamp here in Washington, D.C. But I want to ask you a question, Madam Prime Minister, and that is with respect to the wokeism in the prior segment we talked about and the extremism. And in my opinion, this is just one of many Marxist tactics that are being used to weaken our culture in the United States. I could say even over the West entirely. And President Trump did an interview yesterday on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker, NBC News. And he was asked about repatriating the families of illegal immigrants. And the United States is no stranger to illegal immigration. You've also faced that along with violence associated with it. So I want you to see a quick clip of this interview, and I'd like to get your reaction.
4 million families in America who have mixed immigration status. So I'm talking about parents who might be here illegally, but the kids are here legally. Your borders are
You're talking about separation?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are two aspects to this. Your borders are, Tom Homan said, they can be deported together. Correct. Is that the plan?
Well, that way you keep well, I don't want to be breaking up families, so the only way you don't break up the family is you keep them together, and you have to send them all back. Even
kids who are here legally?
Well, what you're going to do if they want to stay with the father? Look, we have to have rules and regulations. You can always find something out like, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. I'll tell you what's going to be horrible. When we take a wonderful young woman who's with a criminal, and they show the woman, and she could stay by the law, but they show the woman being taken out, or they want her out, and your cameras are focused on her as she's crying, as she's being taken out of our country, and then the public turns against us. But we have to do our job.
So we're repatriating the families of illegal aliens and unifying these families, doing it wholly. Do you think that this is, going to be well received in the media based on your experience as a head of state?
Well, of course, it's not going to be well received by the likes of the BBC and CNN. But they are completely out of touch with what needs to happen and also what the public think. So we've got a massive issue with illegal immigration in Britain. People are coming over in small boats. They are moving into the country. They're claiming welfare. They're taking up housing that should be for British citizens. But we can't do anything about it because of the Human Rights Act. And what happens is every time those illegal immigrants, they're trying to be deported, they will find reasons on the grounds of their human rights they can't be deported. And we have to end that in Britain because people are finding that we have problems with the development of culture that is alien to Britain, things like the development of Sharia law in Britain, the prevalence of grooming gangs. But also it is very unfair on the British population who did not vote to have this level of immigration, either legal or illegal. So I think President Trump is absolutely right. And we have to take on the left, who have spent years and years and years trying to shame conservative politicians into not taking the action the public want. And certainly if Britain is anything to go by, the public are increasingly frustrated that they hear one thing in politicians' promises and manifestos and a completely different thing happening when that party gets into government. And what I like about President Trump is he actually does what he says he will do. And that is what is vital. And that is what is going to be vital to turn the tide in the West. We cannot be soft on this issue anymore.
What's some of the impact you've seen of politicians being soft on this issue of immigration? In our country, it's quote unquote illegal because Joe Biden somehow codified it, but it is technically illegal. And in other countries, it was by other ways. We saw what happened in Germany. We've seen what's happening in the UK. What would you say is maybe some specifics to this change of culture that you're talking about?
So what we've seen marches in support of terrorists, Hamas, or people carrying the Iranian flag on British streets. So we've had the importation of issues which are not British issues. These are issues from overseas that have been brought into our country. We've seen the use of Sharia law in parts of our country and communities that have not integrated with the rest of the people of the United Kingdom. We've also seen people being targeted. There's the teacher in hiding in a northern town because he criticized Islam. So what we are seeing is a creeping cultural change in our country. Now, I'm in favor of people integrating properly into our country. I'm in favor of some high-skilled people being allowed to come into Britain, but that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing an awful lot of people who are coming into our country, claiming welfare, using social housing, and it is becoming increasingly unacceptable to the British population who don't like the way our country is changing.
Yeah, and in reality, I think we're seeing a lot of similar detriment here stateside. Folks, we are continuing our conversation with Prime Minister Liz Truss of the United Kingdom. She's the author of 10 Years to Save the West and the star of the new film that's coming out, The Prime Minister Against the Blob. Stay tuned. We're going to get into that right now. Keep it locked right here. I'm Rich Valdez with our guest, Prime Minister Liz Truss.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Look at Rich Valdez. He's now a radio host, and he's a great radio host.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue the conversation, and I've got a little clip for you of the upcoming film on Liz Truss and what's going on, because it's in many ways very similar to what's happening in the swamp here. It's kind of like We the People versus the swamp, and this is the fight that she fought against the Blob in the UK. Check this out.
You did start having the sensation that the Blob was winning.
The Blob absorbs everything in its path, constantly expanding.
I think the Blob describes wider than just the government. It's a groupthink, such as support of Black Lives Matter, support of the extreme trans agenda, support of eco-extremism. That's a whole shared belief system. Big spending, big government, big taxes, big immigration.
Sums it up, right? You would think that you were a politician here in the United States, because the same thing's happening here. It's a global effort to kind of subvert the will of the people, in my opinion. Your thoughts, Prime Minister?
Absolutely. This is all about power having been taken away from democratically elected politicians and given to unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who have been captured by these ideologies like Islamism, anti-colonialism, eco-extremism, Keynesian economics, modern monetary theory, all of this stuff, which essentially means taking power away from people and giving it to the government. And giving it to the government for ends that nobody supports. We've just talked about illegal immigration. We've talked about the damage to the economy of having huge amounts of regulation or net zero targets to eliminate fossil fuels. Nobody voted for this stuff. And right. Yet what we've seen is governments across the West, including in Britain and America, push this agenda that nobody voted for.
You know, Madam Prime Minister, I love what you're talking about in the film, and I love the premise of the film, and it's important. But I have a question, and it's an interesting one, because obviously you're a successful politician, head of state. My question really is, how does a nice girl from across the pond like you end up becoming a leader in the Conservative Party and then Prime Minister?
Well, the way I became an MP in 2010. And I had lots of different jobs in the government. I was in the education department. I was in the environment department. And I always felt that the only reason we weren't able to deliver Conservative policies is that we didn't have senior enough roles in the government. And if I got to the top, I'd then be able to implement those Conservative policies. And that's how I won the leadership election, is I appealed to the Conservative Party members. And I said, you're frustrated that we're not combating wokery. You're frustrated that we've got all this environmental nonsense. You're frustrated that taxes are too high and government is too big. And I'm actually going to go to the top and I'm going to change things. And when I got to the top and got to the job, I discovered I couldn't change things. And in fact, I was thwarted by the Blob, I mean the Bank of England, I mean the Treasury, who stopped me doing those things, even though I had a mandate which was derived from what people in Britain want. And that was a shocking experience for me. I was shocked by I knew what they thought, but I thought coming in with a mandate, they would respect that mandate and they would help me deliver that. I couldn't have been more wrong. I couldn't have been more wrong.
You know, I think a lot of people would probably experience similar because I think this is the challenge that you face when you're a reformer, when you say, I want to change the blob or I want to drain the swamp. If you don't want to do anything, then you become one of them and everything goes well. So how did they stop you and what could you do differently having had that experience?
So what they did is so we put forward a budget to cut taxes, to get fracking, so to make our energy costs cheaper, to cut regulation. And what the Bank of England did is the day before the budget, they announced the sale of £40 billion of government gilts. So they deliberately queered the pitch the day before our budget. They then failed to properly regulate the pensions industry, and this is all explained in the film. Mm-hmm. And when that fell out, when gilt prices, the price of government bonds started to rise, they pointed the finger at me. And what happened was the mainstream media, like the BBC, reported it, they egged it on, they gave it 24-hour coverage until I was under massive pressure to change course. Otherwise, the government would no longer be able to fund its debt. And that is what I was threatened by the permanent bureaucracy. And ultimately, I did not want Britain to be in a position of bankruptcy, which is what I was being threatened by. And these people in senior roles in the bureaucracy, they would rather Britain face bankruptcy than I'd succeeded in implementing my policy. And that was what was so shocking for me. And you say, what could I have done differently? Well, I mean, if I went back 20 years, the point is, I think what we need differently in Britain is, first of all, we need a mass movement of people who actually understand what the problem is. We need a much better media ecosystem so we don't just face the constant barrage of left-wing media. We need unbending people. And one of the problems I found was many of my colleagues and team wanted to give in to the blob.
Sure.
This is why I totally understand what President Trump is doing now in selecting people who are rock solid, because that is absolutely important. When you face the onslaught of these people, you need colleagues, you need a team who is going to be rock solid in the face of that onslaught. And the most important thing is that in order to succeed in delivering those policies, you really have to dismantle the bureaucracy first. I've now come to the conclusion that it is impossible to deliver the actual change we need in Britain, like cutting immigration, cutting the size of government, getting rid of the net zero nonsense. It's going to be impossible to deliver that until we dismantle the bureaucracy. So that's what I've learned from it.
You have to drain the swamp, right? You have to get the blob.
You have to drain the swamp. You have to kill the blob. And this is a massive task. So what President Trump is doing with Elon Musk, Vivek, is absolutely right. But I know from having been in that position just how powerfully the blob is going to fight back and how dirty they will be in the way they fight back.
Well, Madam Prime Minister, I'm glad you're still standing to tell the story, because I know they can be vicious. And B, I want you to let everybody know how they can watch the film. I know it's releasing tomorrow, I believe. Tell us all about it.
So they can watch the film. It's free to air. It's on the Wall Street Journal website. They can also follow my X, which is @TrussLiz, and I will be putting it out on that channel as well.
Outstanding. Madam Prime Minister, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. God bless. Folks, we're coming right back. Keep it locked right here. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
There is no specific review related to what happened. That said, we are always reviewing our sanctions posture with entities based on their actions. So when entities take different actions, of course, there can be a change in our sanctions posture, but we have nothing new to announce today.
That's Matthew Miller with the State Department talking about Iran, talking about all the military stuff that's going on there. And my hope is to speak with a general about this. Count Delacula, make a quick note if you can. I'd like to speak with General Bob Dees. He was Assistant Division Commander for the 101st Airborne, and he's been a guest on the show. He's terrific. He worked at the Department of Defense, and I think he'd really give us a good take on what's going on here. But I want to go to your calls. Let's go to your calls. Let's go to George in Phoenix, Arizona, KFNX. George, go for it. George, going once, going twice. All right, let's go to Tyson. Tyson is in Minden, Nebraska, KRVN. Tyson, go for it quickly.
Hey, I was just wanting to talk about your view on the Jordan Neely case, on not viewing him and his past crimes, and why you think we shouldn't judge people on their past crimes, like the George Floyd deal.
Sure. Well, I spent about 20 minutes on it at the beginning of the show, but I'll do it again. Again, if you're on a subway and you are Daniel Penny and you're taking the subway to go, I don't know, wherever he was going, and you see some guy that's acting a fool and terrorizing people, he's not wearing a T-shirt that says, hey, by the way, I kidnapped a 7-year-old girl. Hey, by the way, I assaulted senior citizens. All you know is this guy's acting up in that moment. You don't have the benefit of knowing his criminal past. So you're making your choices. You're judging him in that situation on the totality of that situation. So I try to do the same thing in looking at it. We can look at it later when we have more, but that's like the whole term about being a Monday morning quarterback, right? Or a revisionist history. We can look at it later. But it doesn't change in the moment. Daniel Penny didn't know who this guy was, didn't know if he was a deacon, didn't know if he was an axe murderer on the loose. He knew in that moment this guy was a threat to these people. So I think when we look at a situation like that, and I know I always put myself in that situation, I say, would I have done what this guy did or not? And do I agree with what he did? And I do. I agree with what he did. I think he did what had to be done. I don't think he did anything wrong, other than maybe keeping the sleeper hold on for a little longer than most people would do, right? I think you don't leave that on for that long. But again, I wasn't there. So I don't know if he had it fully engaged, but it only takes a few seconds to put somebody to sleep that way. And he had it on for a little bit longer than you would need to put somebody to sleep. But at the end of the day, the reports showed he handed this guy over to the police and to EMS with a heartbeat. So wasn't dead. Died later, and then, of course, there's toxicology. That's just like George Floyd. They're going back and forth saying, well, yes, he had a history of drug use, but that had nothing to do with it, right? So that's when you can look at the past. But in the moment, you have to make a decision based on what it is, just like those cops doing what they did with George Floyd. And in that moment, this guy, again, putting his knee on the neck, on the back of the head, whatever it was, shoulder, for as long as he did, right? 8.5 minutes, 9 minutes. Was that too long? Likely that was too long for anybody, given that situation. Now, when you add that he was some sort of scoundrel in the past, then it kind of justifies those actions, but it shouldn't, because we didn't know them in the moment. That's the point. All right, folks, we're coming right back. Another hour with me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to another hour of the program. It's Monday night. We're live. We're national. Looking forward to your calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I'm hoping to have a good discussion with you all on all the news of the day. Of course, Daniel Neely found not guilty today. He was brought up on charges, as we talked about in the last hour, of involuntary manslaughter and then criminally negligent homicide. And they dropped the one charge because they couldn't come to any consensus in the jury, and then ultimately found him not guilty on everything. He was exonerated today, and I'm glad that he was. But it was a very hectic day, and I played a clip for you earlier, but I want to play it for you again because I think it's worth listening to. Check this out.
Daniel Penny has been found not guilty of criminal negligent homicide, and now that we have this verdict in, there are a lot of angry people out here. The jury deliberated last week. We know that Friday, the judge dismissed the manslaughter charge. The jury was asked to reconvene today to focus over the weekend on that lesser charge of criminal negligent homicide, which they did and have found that verdict. We know the jury, made up of 7 men and 5 women, came together here to find Daniel Penny not guilty of that charge, which carries up to 4 years in prison. But of course, outside the courtroom here, there have been protesters and counter-protesters here all morning and all week, and many people upset about this verdict.
Again, that is a report that we aired earlier. Count the like. What number is that on the hit parade? Number 31, ABC News correspondent Stephanie Romas saying the people are upset. And you know what? She is right. There are people upset. There are a lot of people that are happy. And I would say more people are happy than upset. Now, why would I say that with any type of authority, right? On what basis could I make that? Well, I would base it on the 12 jurors that found him not guilty. If people were truly unhappy with this, it would start with the jurors, which, you know, in theory, are a microcosm of the community, right? A jury of your peers. In my opinion, this is the justice system working. Now, of course, my critics are going to say, oh, so when it's Trump, that's the defendant. It's a miscarriage of justice. It is a witch hunt. It's fake, it's phony, it's fraud. But when it's, in your favor, then it's the system working, right? No, I would say both. Right, I would say this was also a miscarriage of justice when they checked this guy out and they agreed, the prosecutor's office, Alvin Bragg, said, no, we're not going to prosecute. Somebody got to him and said, no, we can't have this. This will be, there's a lot of political fallout here. Somebody's got to pay. We've got to bring charges. And then they reconsidered and brought charges. And, of course, this is not a thing that I think is necessary. To bring charges against someone in a situation like this. I think it's necessary to investigate by all means. You've got to find out the facts, and the facts will take you where they take you. And in this case, the facts went to a place that said this guy didn't do anything that was malicious in his intent. Guess what? The jury agreed, which is great news. But Mr. Neely, the deceased, his parents were on deck for some response today, and they weren't obviously pleased with the outcome, as no parent would be. And this is Jordan Neely's father. He was outside the courthouse today with his remarks. Listen to this.
I just want to say I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts. Really, really hurts. What are we going to do, people? What's going to happen to us now? I had enough of this. The system is rigged. Come on, people. Let's do something about this.
Listen, I really sympathize with anyone that's lost a child, whether it's the parents of Lake and Riley or the father of Jordan Neely. while the circumstances are completely different, right? While one was the aggressor and one is a victim. What I can tell you is I don't wish it on my worst enemy. I really don't. Can I say that the system is rigged? The system can be rigged at times, and we've seen that. Was the system rigged here? I would say it was. It was rigged against Daniel Penny, who should have walked away from this after his interview with the police and the initial investigation and was cleared. And instead, they said, no, we're bringing charges anyway. And then they bring up these really trumped-up charges that they couldn't make stick. So they tried some other ones, and it became clear that what he did didn't match the statute for those offenses. Right? That's just the bottom line there, at least in my opinion. We also had some reaction from Gwen Carr. She's Eric Garner's mother. I don't know if you guys remember this. Being in New York, I remember it like yesterday. Eric Garner was the gentle giant that was selling loose cigarettes outside of a bodega when he was asked to move from where he was by a what are those guys called? The anti-crime task force. These are the tactical guys that are, riding around unmarked cars and plain clothes in New York City. And there was a smaller cop from Staten Island, and he took him down, brought him down with a chokehold, which he learned in the police academy. Wasn't like he went off book over here. And again, Gardner, health issues, past issues, and his weight, and said he couldn't breathe, didn't believe him. The guy died. It was a huge deal, right? I can't breathe. Remember that? It was horrible. And it really is. I put myself in the victim's shoes right here, right? I say, this guy, victim at the end of the day, aggressor in the beginning. And, we could always posture and say, you know what? You mess around, you're gonna find out. You fool around, you find out. We could say that. We could also say, like, who told him to go do those things? Who told him not to listen to the cops? Granted, we could say all those things. But at the end of the day, this was a man saying he couldn't breathe. And, I don't want to be that guy at the hands of our government, right? I think we got to work with law enforcement. We have to respect law enforcement. Like you guys know, my brother's from NYPD. I volunteered for the police in New Jersey. I get it. And I respect the constabulary. I do. I also respect the Constitution. And I'm not suggesting that there was any violation thereof. I'm just saying that, I never go so overboard with my fanaticism of anything where I work against myself, right? I'm never going to say, oh my gosh, I love the cops so much that I will give up my rights. No. You're not searching me without a warrant unless I say you can. I'm not giving up any rights. And I'm not saying that this guy gave up any of his, but my point is we need to walk the line, right? You go too far to one side, you're in the wrong. You go too far to the other side, you're in the wrong. Just walk the straight and narrow, do the right thing, and we should all be all right. So anyway, that was the reaction there. I want to get some reaction from you all that are out there in the world. Let's go to Paul. Paul's in Boise, Idaho, listening on KBFI from his neighboring state there. Paul, your thoughts on Daniel Penny?
Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, it's always a hot button issue when black and white clash, and I don't need to get into that part of it, but I had an experience. I'm on the state of Idaho, and so I'm 2,000 miles away from ground zero where it went down today, and I had an experience 31 years ago where I was on a jury, and I got to tell you, they don't give you all the information that they get, the district attorneys. They don't give you all the information, so sometimes you're in there blind and you have earplugs in. So you're not getting all the information, even though you think you are. You're given what they give you in court. You need 14 jurors. 2 would have to be alternates in case one or two of them of the 12 get sick. I believe in the jury system. It took 31 days for us to find him, or the individuals responsible for the triple homicide, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And in Idaho, we have the death penalty, so I had to vote with my conscience about what I experienced in the courtroom and what I heard. And so every one of us, we all voted guilty. And to this day, I don't regret doing it. And it's a good system that we have. Sometimes it's not so perfect, but the hate and the vitriol that I heard after the verdict was read and the people in the streets, I can understand their anger, but all it does is continue to divide us even further. There's no good coming out of it. It's really, maybe it's good that they talk about it and yell about it and get it out, but to carry it on any further, to turn it into another George Floyd, would be totally detrimental to the whole country.
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul. I think that the country doesn't ever want another George Floyd. Even the BLM people, right? We heard from Hawk Newsom. We heard from this man's family. These people are upset, and understandably upset. But I don't think any of them want violence in the streets. They don't want people dying at the hands of these violent riots, police stations being burned to the ground, police vehicles being burnt to the ground. This wasn't the police that did this, right? This was a private citizen coming to the defense of his fellow man on a subway. And I think that's commendable. And I think we need to protect the Good Samaritan with our Good Samaritan laws. You don't want a society where people are discouraged from doing the right thing. I think that's where we land on this one. Paul, thanks for your call, brother. Straight ahead, we're going to talk about what's going on with the alleged ceasefire. Hopefully that's shaping up a little bit better with Hezbollah and Hamas. And I also want to get some reaction to Assad fleeing Syria, going into Russia, and so much more, as well as Kash Patel and his nomination to the FBI. Will he get it? Will he not get it? We're going to talk about that and more. We've got the editor-in-chief of JNS coming up shortly. Jonathan Tobin scheduled to be with us. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
You know, for years, the main backers of Assad have been Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia. But over the last week, their support collapsed, all three of them, because all three of them are far weaker today than they were when I took office. And let's remember why. After Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, when much of the world responded with horror, Iran and its proxies chose to launch a multi-front war against Israel. That was a historic mistake on Iran's part. Today, Iran's main territorial proxy, Hezbollah, is also on its back.
All right, I don't know what planet you guys are on, but I'm hearing Joe El Baboso Biden say that today, Iran is weaker than it was when he took office, and Russia. And all I could think of is when he took office, Russia was still in Russia. The Russian army was still in Russia. Today, they're in Ukraine. When he took office, Iran had not yet been a week away from having a nuclear weapon. According to his office, that's where they are. And that was a month ago. So I don't know what to make of that statement. It's confusing to me, but Jonathan Tobin's the editor-in-chief of JNS, the Jewish News Syndicate. He's a senior contributor at The Federalist, a columnist at Newsweek, and he's a frequent on this show. We love him. He's terrific. Jonathan Tobin, welcome back, sir.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
I'd love to know what you think of President Biden's statement. Maybe I'm the one that's listening to it the wrong way, but do you think what he said was accurate, that Iran and Russia are weaker today than when he took office?
It's he's living. No, that part is not only wrong, but how Assad was toppled was directly related to Israel ignoring everything that Biden wanted it to do. That's what it's so egregious. Why what he said is such a terrible lie. Now, of course, as you say, Russia was in Russia. It wasn't in Ukraine when he took office. Iran was on Iran's economy was on its knees because of Trump's maximum pressure. Policy of sanctions and fighting back against its terrorists. When Biden came in with his team of Obama alumni, they reversed all that and opened up the floodgates of cash to Iran, which they used to fund terrorism. And then October 7th, we know that Biden's weakness, the Afghanistan withdrawal, largely led to Putin's decision to test OS by going into Ukraine. But what happened on October 7th of last year was a direct result of Biden's weakness as well. It was Iran, as Biden said, launching a 7-front war against Israel. But the reason why Iran is weaker today than it was on October 6th of last year is because Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu consistently refused to listen to the advice and the warnings and the threats and the pressure that was exerted upon it by Biden. If it had been up to Biden, Hamas would be still in Rafah, still holding much of the Gaza Strip, rather than reduced to hit-and-run guerrilla raids, just in their tunnels. Just as important, in fact, and directly related to what has just happened in Syria, Israel decided, against the advice and the threats and the pressure from Biden, to attack Hezbollah, which had been firing into northern Israel since October 7th, and essentially depopulating a large section of northern Israel, creating tens of thousands of Israeli refugees in their own country. Netanyahu said enough of that, and they launched the attack on Hezbollah. Everybody knows about the exploding pagers and walkie-talkies, and then Israel's strategic bombing, and then invasion of southern Lebanon, which happened against Biden's wishes. And that was a crucial moment because it attacked, this withdrew a basic prop of the Iranian regime. Hezbollah didn't exist to protect Lebanon against Israel. Israel was no threat to Lebanon, but to protect Iran against anybody attacking it. And by weakening it, it forced Iran to give up its colony in Syria, and that's why we are where we are.
Well, let's pick up right there. Jonathan Tobin, editor-in-chief of JNS. When we come back, what's going on with Syria? We'll hear from Netanyahu. Get your reaction to that. Assad has fled Syria. Folks, are coming right back with Jonathan Tobin. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez live with you until 1 a.m. Eastern time. You know the number, 833-482-5337. If you want to weigh in, I'm happy to chat with you in a little bit. 833-4-VALDEZ. And I want to replay a clip that I played a little bit earlier. It's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel reacting. I played this in our conversation with former Prime Minister Truss just a little while ago. And I want to play it again to get reaction to the same thing from Jonathan Tobin, because this is a very extraordinary moment in history where you have Bashar al-Assad fleeing Damascus, Syria because of quote-unquote rebels. I don't know if those rebels are CIA or some other enemy, and we'll get to his musings on that as well. But Jonathan Tobin, please listen to this.
This is a historic day for the Middle East. The collapse of the Assad regime, the tyranny in Damascus, offers great opportunity, but also is fraught with significant dangers. This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters, It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its suppression. But it also means we have to take action against possible threats. One of them is the collapse of the Separation of Forces Agreement from 1974 between Israel and Syria. This agreement held for 50 years. Last night it collapsed. The Syrian army abandoned its positions. We gave the Israeli army the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel. This is a temporary defensive position until a suitable arrangement is found. Equally, we send a hand of peace to all those beyond our border in Syria, to the Druze, to the Kurds, to the Christians, and to the Muslims who want to live in peace with Israel. We're going to follow events very carefully. If we can establish neighborly relations and a peaceful relations with the new forces emerging in Syria, that's our desire. But if we do not, we'll do whatever it takes to defend the state of Israel and the border of Israel.
Well, an outstanding statement, in my opinion. Jonathan Tobin, what do you think of Prime Minister Netanyahu's position here?
Well, he's being entirely accurate. This is, what happened in Syria is the direct result of Israel's defeat of Hezbollah, who are the shock troops of Iran, and with Russia distracted in Ukraine and Hezbollah, stripped of its leadership and much of its, its munitions, it was in no position to intervene to preserve Assad in power, as Iran and Russia had preserved him in power throughout 13 years of civil war. Now, what he also said that was accurate was, we don't know what this is going to bring. I mean, it's fine to say, as the Washington Post wrote today, Syria is now free. It's free of Assad, but it's not free, because the rebel, the force that took over in Damascus, it's largely composed of former Al Qaeda and ISIS operatives. It is aided by Turkey primarily. I don't think the CIA has too much to do with it.
I never trust these overthrows of government. I feel like the CIA is always involved somewhere. But go ahead, you say Turkey.
That's generally not a bad bet. I don't think that's what happened here. I think our CIA is so compromised and so
weakened, like
so
everything
wound
else.
up with deep state conspiracies here. They're not capable of that.
Right. Too busy getting Trump.
Which leads me to where I think the relevant debate now is. It's not whether Israel is going to defend itself. It will. It's what is the United States going to do? And I think we have this little debate now that started within the last couple of days, where where the foreign policy establishment and outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times and its so-called Middle East expert Tom Friedman are all saying now is the time for the United States to intervene in Syria, to aid this new government, to get ourselves deeply involved. And Trump's response was no. Let's keep out of it. There are no good guys in this fight. Let's watch and see. Let's contain it, make sure violence doesn't spread. But no, we're not getting involved. So it's like, who are you going to listen to? The foreign policy experts who have led this country into disaster after disaster for the last 30 years, or Donald Trump? And the answer there is pretty obviously Donald Trump, because he, whatever you think of him, he understands what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq and why the Middle East experts were wrong about the conflict between the Palestinians and Israel, as they were wrong when they told them not to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, not to recognize Israeli sovereignty on the Golan Heights. They've been wrong over and over again. This is not the time for us to get ourselves involved in a quagmire where we don't know, whose side we should be on. We can't fix Syria any more than we could fix Afghanistan or Iraq. And I think Trump should trust his instincts and definitely not listen to the experts.
So does Assad fade off into history now and just become a very obscure Russian citizen now that he's seeking asylum there? Like, what happens with Assad?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like these Soviets, the spies that, Tim Philby or people, it's like they defect there, and then they put them in some housing block, in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, it's a pretty sorry existence from his, lifestyles of the rich and famous dictators that he lived along with his wife and family in Syria. But he was their pup. He was their guy there. He was enabling Putin to pretend that he was reviving the Soviet Empire or the Tsarist Empire. So they're kind of stuck with him. But he isn't of any interest to us anymore. He's left the pages of history. He was the successor to his brutal dictator father, and he managed to help start a civil war where he and his Iranian and Russian allies killed more than 500,000 people and created up to 7 million refugees, many of whom flooded Europe, creating a whole set of problems. We don't need to worry about him anymore. We have to worry about the rogues that are currently in Damascus, and make sure that they don't spread jihad to any place else. And as much as they're trying to pretend, at least some of them are, that they really aren't jihadists anymore, we should not take that at face value and not get involved in this.
And folks, I just want to remind you, we're on with Jonathan Tobin, editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, senior contributor at The Federalist, and a columnist at Newsweek.com. And Jonathan Tobin, with where we are now, just to get a quick take on the financial part of the geopolitical situation, I know that Russia was a leading force in the BRICS initiative, and they were coming for our lunch and to destroy the dollar, and Putin since indicated he's easing up on that, and now he's got his allies that are falling apart and his puppet regimes. Do you think that takes the wind out of the sails of the BRICS movement, or are you hearing otherwise?
I think that's probably true. Listen, we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know what Putin has up his sleeve, but he's been weakened. And this is, the departure of Biden, or what's left of Biden, in our leaderless country right now, which is so dangerous. And the accession of Trump 2.0, a new, stronger American administration. This is Putin's chance to negotiate his way out of the quagmire that he put himself in Ukraine. Right now the opportunity for the United States is to pick up where Trump left off at the end of 2020 with respect to pressuring Iran, making sure it's not spreading disaster elsewhere, and as well as the true meaning of an American first policy, which is defending the dollar, defending our interests abroad, and not being drawn into conflicts where we have no clear interest, focusing on the threat from China, as well as ensuring that Iran is not going to go nuclear, or at least not take that next step, and defend our allies and our interests. That is where Trump's emphasis is, and it's a refreshing change of pace after 4 years of weakness and disaster.
Yeah.
And I think America's foes, and certainly Putin is no friend, and Iran understand that there's a new sheriff, and that the 4 years where they could run amok is over. And now it's up to Trump to make that point clear to them, and to get us, successfully navigate this country towards a better situation.
Jonathan Tobin, tell everybody how they can follow you and keep up to speed with the work you're doing.
Well, you can follow us at jns.org. That's jns.org. Subscribe to our free twice-a-day newsletters with news about the Middle East and American politics as well, and watch our a whole array of podcasts, two of which I do, many others as well on our JNS YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and do a search for JNS. You can find all our programs there, and of course read all our work at jns.org.
Check them out at jns.org. Check them out on YouTube. Give them a follow. Jonathan Tobin, editor-in-chief of Jewish News Syndicate, contributor at The Federalist, and a columnist at Newsweek. Sir, I appreciate it. Godspeed to you.
Thanks very much.
You bet. And folks, we continue with your calls, your reactions, your thoughts, and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, I want to get your reaction to Daniel Penny, Bashar al-Assad, Syria collapsing, and so much more. Let's go with Robert, Phoenix, Arizona, KFNX. Go right ahead.
How you doing tonight? It's
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, your last speaker was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. That's why I listened to him. The Assad from Syria going into Russia, I think that's a weak move on Russia's part. I think it's just everybody said, where's he going to go? Where did he go? Well, you know where he went. Putin is right there going, okay, I'm licking my wounds. But he has an air base there, and they haven't touched that. And I think diplomatically, he should just fly out, say goodbye.
Yeah, well, I think he did. I think he's already in Russia. He's already flown out. And he's taken cover. These guys are out to get him, and he's now being protected by Putin. So he's I think he's at this point he's not only tucking tail, he's trying to survive. So it's over for him. I don't think he gets to leave there anytime soon. It's amazing how 25 years ruled with an iron fist, and then overnight it's like voila, it just goes away. But yeah, Robert, thanks. I agree with you, brother, and thank you for your call. It's one of those things where we think, everything is going to remain the same, and then you get this news that Trump's coming to office, and all sorts of things start changing. And I'm going to tell you, we got 41 days to go till Inauguration Day. I think that's what the math is, right? 41 days. Let me tell you, I believe that this is going to be a scary 41 days. Right? Everybody and their mama who can take advantage of Joe Biden and the weakness of the U.S. is going to try and do it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple of more caravans at the border. Of course, Trump's going to make his phone calls and say, hey, look, I'm only 41 days away from office. You don't want to do this right now. He's going to try and control things as best he can. But the reality is it's Biden that's still in the driver's seat, despite having checked out and, not being present. And I'm just hopeful that we'll be able to mitigate a lot of these circumstances because I think we're going to see a lot of people trying to take advantage. Let us continue. Where do we go? We go with Joe. Joe's in Salem, Arkansas, KSAR. Joe, what are your thoughts on Daniel Penny?
Thank you, Rich. He was a good Samaritan, and I want to know before I comment, do you have a Good Samaritan statute in New York?
There is one in New Jersey, and I'm not sure if there is one in New York, but I'll tell you this. It typically doesn't cover that, right? It typically covers someone that is rendering aid and maybe breaks your rib or something like that, doing CPR. In this case, he wasn't doing CPR. He was trying to subdue the guy. I could see the parallels, but I don't think it applied here. And maybe it did, maybe we'll bring Doug Burns or somebody who's or Amir Benno, who's a former ADA in New York City, to give us some reaction to that. But I agree with you. I think he was acting as a good Samaritan, and whether he's protected by that law per se or not, we all have a right to self-defense. And in approaching this guy, things got out of hand. So I don't see why we would try to put him in jail for premeditated murder, right? Or even involuntary manslaughter. I don't think he intended to kill him, which is what the manslaughter charge is. But this was not something that he was aggressing towards the guy. He was defending people.
And I understand that he was acted alone, right? There was no other men got up to help him?
There was one guy next to him in the video that I saw that, looked like at one point he was trying to hold him down while he was trying to put the sleeper hold on him. And it's unclear to me how involved he was. And there were other couple of guys standing around saying things like telling the guy to calm down, take it easy, don't squeeze too hard, this type of stuff. But at least from what I remember, I haven't seen that video in a while. But he was the main guy. It seemed to be a one-on-one for the most part.
The 2 or 3 incidents I was involved in my life, and we didn't have any problem because usually 2 or 3 men would notice trouble brewing, and we could put them down without touching their neck. I sure wouldn't be messing with anybody's neck after what we've seen happen here. But Arkansas Good Samaritan law passed, 10 or 15 years ago now. It gives you limited liability and a certain amount of immunity. It's just really hard to get even charged, much less convicted. But,
right.
We're talking about an all-Anglo community here, so, I guarantee you.
But to be frank, right, Joe, honestly, here in New York City, where it's very eclectic, it's very racially diverse, Alvin Bragg passed on this case. He didn't want to prosecute. It wasn't until pressure was applied by the BLM crowd, I'm going to call them for lack of a better word, and he succumbed to that pressure, and then voila, he started bringing the case. But I think he knew he was going to lose it. But then again, he's good at losing cases, right? Joe, thank you for the call, brother. Amigos, we come right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, and again, so much news today. We haven't even gotten to all of it, so they gave me another hour. I'm here for another hour with you, and just listen to this quick clip. This is Jessica Tisch, commissioner of the NYPD. They found the bad guy that shot the CEO of United Healthcare.
Earlier this morning in Altoona, Pennsylvania, members of the Altoona Police Department arrested Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old male, on firearms charges. At this time, he is believed to be our person of interest in the brazen targeted murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan.
So that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to hear from you guys, we the people, the American people, 833-4-VALDEZ. Is this the guy that did it? What do you think his motive is? Your reaction to him being caught in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Shout out to everybody listening in the Altoona area. I think you guys can hear KDKA from there, and as well as a couple other stations. Anyway, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Your call is coming up right now.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to another hour of the program. Happy to be here with you live, national, this Monday night. 833-482-5337 is our phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. And, man, we talked about a lot tonight. We had an excellent conversation with former British Prime Minister Liz Truss. We also had a really good conversation with Jonathan Tobin from JNS about what's going on geopolitically around the world. And I also want to have some conversation regarding Daniel Penny and also the big development on Mr. Mangione, the gentleman that has been identified as a person of interest in the murder of Mr. Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare. This is the guy that was shot in the head in New York City, in Manhattan, just last week. Laura Diaz from Fox 11 in Los Angeles has the report.
I'm honored to be speaking to you all today on behalf of the Gilman class of 2016.
That's Luigi Mangione, class of 2016, in a video obtained by the New York Post.
Many of the students characterized our class as inventive, in both imagination and initiative.
He's giving his address as valedictorian at the prestigious Gilman All-Boys School in Baltimore. Tuition runs about $40,000 a year. Mangione, who is now suspected of the brutal murder of healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, also had ties here in California. The University of Pennsylvania graduate from a prominent family also spent time at Stanford University in Palo Alto, California. Officials said in a statement, "We can confirm that a person by the name of Luigi Mangione was employed as head counselor of the Stanford Pre-Collegiate Studies program between May and September of 2019. But Mangione's career connections took him further south to the palm trees and beaches of Santa Monica." According to TrueCar, suspect Mangione worked for the Santa Monica-based firm. They said as of 2023, he was no longer an employee.
And again, I played this in the last hour, but I just want to reiterate so you have all the facts. You know me, I like to bring the receipts as often as I can. And we've got the commissioner of police, the brand new commissioner of police in New York City, Miss Tisch. She made some statements today outlining the case and how they've brought the case, how police in Altoona, Pennsylvania, which, again, just, I don't know, about 20 minutes ago, just had a press conference that I saw. And great police work. So shout out to the Altoona PD. Shout out to the McDonald's person who identified him. You'll hear about that in a moment, how he was identified by someone from McDonald's. But I want to start off again with a replay here on Commissioner Tisch.
Earlier this morning in Altoona, Pennsylvania, members of the Altoona Police Department arrested Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old male, on firearms charges. At this time, he is believed to be our person of interest in the brazen targeted murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan.
And again, this is the guy that they've caught. They've caught him in Pennsylvania. He was identified by somebody at Mickey D's. And my question earlier was, and I said it jokingly, but I guess it's worth asking, is this the same Mickey D's that El Trompito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States, was working at when he was filling those French fry orders? Right? Remember that when he did the drive-through? And in my opinion, that helped put him over the top in Pennsylvania. Well, I don't know if it was or wasn't the same Pennsylvania McDonald's, but I do know that it was somebody at a Pennsylvania McDonald's that tipped off the police. Listen to this.
The suspect was in a McDonald's and was recognized by an employee who then called local police. Responding officers questioned the suspect, who was acting suspiciously and was carrying multiple fraudulent IDs as well as a U.S. passport. Upon further investigation, officers recovered a firearm on his person as well as a suppressor, both consistent with the weapon used in the murder. They also recovered clothing, including a mask consistent with those worn by our wanted individual. Also recovered was a fraudulent New Jersey ID, matching the ID our suspect used to check into his New York City hostel before the shooting incident.
Again, that's NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch in a press conference earlier today. So they've gotten the guy. And let me tell you, I think, in terms of how murders go, this guy seems like he really put a lot of thought into it. He's a very smart guy. He was valedictorian, was running the Stanford pre-collegiate program, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Smart guy, but we live in such a police state. We live in such a Big Brother 1984 kind of world. That's very difficult to, in my opinion. I haven't done it, haven't tried it, but it seems to me like they're going to get you. They're going to get you eventually because there's just cameras everywhere. There's a way to track you everywhere. Your phone is tracking you. The minute that they have any inclination of, they got a facial hit, a facial recognition, they do this, they work with cops everywhere. I mean, outstanding police work, outstanding detectives. They're doing a great job, both in NYPD and in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Because last week, I think I made this comment, and it wasn't original to me. It was me really just agreeing with something I had heard from a retired NYPD detective, saying that once they've released the name, once they've released like photos and kind of like a timeline of, we think he was here, we saw him here, we got this picture of him here. When they release that stuff, it's not because they're begging the public to help find him, although it could be. But it's usually because they're very close to zeroing in on the person, and they kind of want to smoke him out so that they'll make a move. And I think his assessment was right. They had eyes, they had an idea. Maybe they didn't have eyes on him, but they had an idea of where he was, and they needed to smoke him out, hoping he would run. And whatever they did worked. And kudos to McDonald's guy who or girl who saw him and recognized him and put that 2 and 2 together. Outstanding work by all. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on this Luigi Mangione, the murderer, hitman, I don't know what we're going to call him right now, Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO that was murdered last week right outside the hotel he was staying at in New York City. And we've got calls from Wisconsin, Montana, Florida, and more on the line. So here's the number again, 833-482-5337. If you've never called this show, I'd love for you to call in today. I love speaking with first-time callers. We move you to the front of the list. And I want to get your thoughts on this Mangione. What do you think the motive is here? Do you think last week some people were musing, saying it had to be his wife that did it? Now we don't know if the wife hired this guy or not, if this guy has his own gripes. Was it, he was upset because Obama said he could keep his doctor, but he couldn't? I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I want to know, and I want to know what you guys think. 833-482-5337, plus everything else that we've talked about tonight. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, it's Rich Valdez. I'm live with you tonight, straight until 1 a.m. Eastern time. Happy to be here with you having this discussion. And we're talking about the CEO murdered in New York City and the suspect that's now in police custody. And this was, along with other things, Trump and all of the comments that he made on the Sunday shows yesterday on Meet the Press. We're going to get to his interview with Kristen Welker, I believe. Really, really good interview. We have a few clips of that. But I want you to hear a clip of Congressman Ro Khanna. He's on ABC this week discussing this with Martha Raddatz. Listen to this.
Has this online vitriol surprised you?
Well, first of all, let me just say it was horrific. I mean, this is a father we're talking about of 2 children, and my sympathies to the entire family. There is no justification for violence. But the outpouring afterwards has not surprised me. Look, I, as a congressperson, had United Healthcare deny a prescription for a nasal $100 pump spray, and I couldn't get them to reverse this. So imagine what ordinary people are dealing with. The biggest denial comes when it's cancer treatment. I mean, people are getting denied on cancer treatment. And my view is very simple. Why can't we have a rule that if a doctor prescribes something and if Medicare, traditional Medicare, is going to cover it, then private insurance companies should be forced to cover it? I mean, it's absurd in this country what's going on.
That's Rep. Ro Kahana. He says, look, what happened to this man is horrific, but yeah, it's absurd what's going on with insurance. And I think most people agree with that. Right? We may not like the idea of having the government mandate what companies pay for and don't pay for, but at the same time, the government's here to protect us from this evil insurance empire. And I've got to tell you, they're evil. I haven't had a ton of problems with my health insurance, thank God. But I think I pay way too much. And B, I have tons of problems with my auto insurance. They just keep raising the rates really for no reason, right? It's like the better my driving record gets, the more they want to charge me. These people are out of control. And I see why people are mad. I see why people are saying, I could have went on an extra vacation this year had I not had to pay for all these extra overages in insurance and whatnot. So I understand people can be upset, but no, I don't understand anybody going, I'm so upset I'm going to shoot this person. That's crazy. Come on, man. What kind of world do we live in here? So Rep. Ro Kahana, but respectfully, yes, it was horrific and period, the end, right? Not horrific, but I think, we don't need to modify the statement here. It was horrific, and let's leave it at that. Anyway, let's get to the calls. We've got Jim in Kenosha, Wisconsin, streaming the show on WIZM. Jim, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Rich, it's an honor to talk to you.
Likewise, Jim. Thank you.
By the way, first-time caller.
Outstanding.
Even though I didn't tell the screener that. But, listen,
I'm glad
Rich,
you're on.
I'm just so surprised about this whole thing. That if the guy was that smart, yet he kept his mask and everything with him, but nevertheless, I still believe let's let the courts play it out. We don't really know what we're seeing yet. Even though I tell you what, you kind of talked me out of what I called for.
What was that?
Well, I just a lot of things seem fishy about this, but
you're saying maybe it isn't the guy? They're just feeding us a story.
I just what? It's kind of hard to trust the media in anything today.
I agree with that. Listen, I agree. I was because of that, right? Because of this incredulous nature that we have developed, in particular for our media, this legacy media. I saw earlier a picture of this guy, and they said this is a guy named Mangione, Luigi Mangione, and then they're comparing it. It's a juxtaposition, side by side, split screen of him in a taxi cab where they got some footage of him, and he's wearing a mask and he has a hood on. So all you can see is like half of the arch of his eyebrow. It looked a lot thinner, the eyebrow. In real life, it was a lot thicker of an eyebrow. Same complexion. But I mean, when you're talking about getting somebody on a murder charge, you want to make sure you got more than maybe that's the same eyebrow, right? Now, I'm not a facial recognition expert, but I know I was like, I don't know if that's even the same guy. I was saying that. So, I could understand somebody else saying the same thing and having that same incredulous nature about them, saying, you know what, I'm not buying it. I think a lot of people are skeptical, and rightfully so. We've been lied to in the past. Here, I don't know the benefit of anything. I don't know why anybody would be involved in a cover-up of this guy. He's dead already. Why protect anybody? And that's, to me, the motive there. I don't see the get, right? What's the benefit of anyone saying, oh, well, it was really this guy that killed him, unless you're trying to protect, was it some sort of famous person? I think ultimately the guy probably did do it. He's a smart guy. He tried hard. Something I've learned in life, and it's going to sound maybe crass or too simple, but when we deal with grief, that one of the first stages is denial. And when my mom died, one of the things I kept telling myself was, people get sick and they die. And I had to remind myself of that, because I was really like, oh, I can't believe it. It's gone too soon. How could that happen? Maybe if we could have done this, if we would have done that, Maybe we should have had a better doctor, a more aggressive doctor. And ultimately, I had to reconcile with this idea that people do get sick and they die. And that's a reality. Not everybody gets better. And as simple as it sounds, I feel like this is one of those situations where good people do bad things. That's true. This guy might be a valedictorian. He might have no previous criminal record. He might have no real motive even, let's just say, to do this and still do it. Because so many crimes that are committed are crimes of opportunity. This likely wasn't one. This seems like it's premeditated and there's probably some motive that we'll find out about somewhere. Maybe even what Ro Kahana said. Maybe this guy had somebody in his family whose cancer treatment was refused. I don't know. And I'm not trying to speculate either. I am trying to offer a little conjecture on the totality of the circumstance, which is, I think everybody's a good person until they're not a good person anymore and they become a bad person. And that's it. Maybe this guy doesn't kill people every day. I think there's a lot of serial killers that don't kill people every day, right? They wait a while, they scope the situation out, and they wait. They're careful. They plan this stuff. They're methodical. So I think this guy could very well be, I don't put it past anybody. Anybody can become the next person that loses it and it breaks for them. And that's a sad thing, but it's a reality. Jim, thanks for your call. Shout out to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Everybody listening on WIZM. I appreciate it. And let me see. Did we go to another one? No, I don't think so. Not yet, because then you'll get cut off by the music, and that's coming in just probably about a minute or so. And I don't want to rush anybody off the phone. But I will say, we also had some conversation about Daniel Penny. We had some conversation with Prime Minister Liz Truss about everything going on. And when we come back, I want you to hear a little bit from El Trompito, who was on with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, making comments from ending birthright citizenship to so many other topics that I want you to hear, because I really think he, as they say in slang nowadays, he cooked, right? He cooked, or he ate it. He really did. He killed it. He did a phenomenal job in this interview, really laying it down. And I think there's a new, I don't want to say confidence, because I think Trump's always been a very confident guy, but it's a new air of confidence, if you will. It's the, I've done this. I've won 3 times already. That type of bravado that he's bringing to the table. And it suits him. It suits him. It's very presidential, if you will. Anyway, folks, Rich Valdez coming right back with your calls. Ohio, Indiana, Florida, Montana. We got Canada on the line as well. We're going to get to you guys in a moment. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. Keep it locked right here. It's me, Rich Valdez.
Glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
This is got to be one of my favorite bumps right here. Keep it going, Count. It's kind of hip-hoppy. It's kind of high school bandy. I don't know, it's like a mix. Put it up right there. Doing my chair dance right here. All right. Anyway, now that I'm done doing my chair dance and giving kudos to Count Delacula for pulling out some of the greatest tracks radio bumper music has ever heard, I want to bring your attention to some audio. We have some audio of El Trompito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States. He was on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker, and great conversation, from talking about what's going on with Kash Patel to what's going on with birthright citizenship, with the repatriation of complete families that are on the deportation list or self-deportation. I mean, just so many excellent topics. And I'll be using these audio clips tonight. I'll probably use them again tomorrow because they're really good. And sometimes you got to reiterate these to really let them hit home. But I want to start with this one on Kash Patel, because I'm very supportive of Kash Patel to be the director of the FBI. He's someone that's been on this program, I don't know, probably half a dozen times. And he's always been very clear. He's always been very, very clear on where he stands. He's written his books. They're called Government Gangsters. He makes no bones about these things, right? And whether he's speaking from his experience as a federal prosecutor or his experience as a federal public defender or his experience as chief of staff at the Pentagon, or where he became famous, right, if you will, with the Nunez memo, right, where he talked all about how this deep state was operating and getting Trump when he was the national security advisor and chief investigator for the House Intelligence Committee. I mean, Kash Patel has a lot of really relevant experience. So when he talks about this deep state, I think he knows what he's talking about. But Kristen Welker wasn't happy with that, and she had some questions for El Trompito about Kash Patel. Listen to this.
You named Kash Patel to be the next FBI director. He has a list in his book of 60 people that he calls members of the so-called deep state. It includes Democrats like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. It includes former members of your cabinet, from Bill Barr to Christopher Wray. You campaigned on destroying the deep state. Do you want Kash Patel to launch investigations into people on that list?
No, I mean, he's going to do what he thinks is right.
Do you think that's right? Do you think that's right, sir?
If they think that somebody was dishonest or crooked or a corrupt politician, I think he probably has an obligation to do it. But
are you going to direct him to do it?
No, not at all. Not at all. We have two great people there. We have him and we have Pam. And Pam Bondi has been like a rocket ship. She's very popular and very good and very fair. And Kash Patel is very fair. I'll tell you, I thought Kash may be difficult because he's, a strong conservative voice. And I don't know of anybody that's not singing his praises.
I agree. Kash Patel is competent. He knows what's going on. And he's got the political wherewithal, in my opinion, to withstand the storm that's coming his way. And period, the end, that's the kind of guy that you need to take on this entrenched bureaucracy and get people to do what they have to do, to restructure the FBI, to gut the FBI, to do whatever you have to do. And it's not just the FBI. There's a lot of these organizations. The government has gotten way too used to running the show as opposed to being the instrumentality of we the people. And can they do that in 4 years? I don't think so. We talked about what Liz Truss went through as prime minister in UK. The Brits gave her a hard way to go, and I get it. But it doesn't mean you don't try, and it doesn't mean you don't lay foundation. Look at Trump. He did some. He's coming back for more. That's how it works. You got to work in phases sometimes. Nothing happens overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. And the Roman Empire didn't fall in a day either, but it did fall pretty quickly once the ball got rolling. So we need to prevent that from happening by holding on to what we've got. Let's hit the phones. Let me see. Where do we go? Al's calling us from Arcadia, Florida, WENG. Go right ahead.
Rich, you're the man. I'm an old school Levinite, okay? And I love
you.
Al,
thank you, brother.
I want to say you're a real humanitarian for taking these calls from Jerome, night after night, because not every radio guy would take calls from a mentally retarded person.
Oh, my goodness. Let's be nice, right? Come on. He just doesn't see it the way we do. He's, I don't know, a conservative in training.
He got dropped on the head when he was a child. Anyway, what I wanted to say is with the Daniel Penny case, what the Black Lives Matter guy was saying is about the vigilantes. He's saying that because Daniel Penny is not a vigilante. He's saying that he's putting a hit out on Daniel Penny. That's what people aren't realizing.
You know, it could be. It also could be that they're tired of what the media has been feeding them, which is that it's open season on black men. And listen, I think that some people buy into the hype, and others are part of fueling the fire. But the reality is, if the media is constantly telling you this, right? And I've spoken with way too many people, including callers on this program, where they don't wake up in the morning different than you and me, right? A lot of these people wake up in the morning and they're just like, look, I want to go and make some money and drive a nice car and live in a nice place and afford a good living for myself and my children, my family. And I mean, not everybody, but most. And some people, they have a chip on their shoulder because of whatever the media's told them, right? Whether it be my brethren in the Latino Hispanic community saying, hey, you know what? The Trump and the Republicans are against you because they're against immigration, which is not even true, right? Being against illegal immigration doesn't mean that you're against immigration as a whole. And I think sometimes when you're fed these false narratives, people, they have disdain, right? They become angry. They feel slighted, and they're like, yeah, you know what? Screw you, man. I don't want to do what you say, or I don't like the way you're treating me. And I think that's what's happening right now. You've got people that are gaslighting. People like Hawk Newsom, in my opinion, are out there trying to gaslight these people, saying, look, this is another miscarriage of justice. Another white man gets to kill a black man with impunity. And, you know, it sounds nice rhetorically if that's the position you're taking. But the reality, we know what the reality was, right? There was black witnesses on that plane, on that train, excuse me. There was all sorts of people. So ultimately, what do? We just got to call it for what it is. And this man, Daniel Penny, is a innocent man. He's a hero. He saved people. I don't know if he saved their lives. I don't know if their lives are in danger. I know that they certainly, it could be, right? Things can go south very quickly. And main thing, I don't think he did anything malicious. He wasn't there to hurt anybody. He was there trying to do the right thing. And he shouldn't be prosecuted for that. If you can prove the intent and say, no, you know what, this guy Penny thinks he's G.I. Joe. This guy has, you know, some seriously aggressive PTSD from his time in service, and he gets on the subway, and we know that he has a history of violence towards people. He's a racist. He's this, the way they're going to try and paint it. You know, you could try, but you got to be able to prove that stuff. And if you can't prove that stuff, and you've got witnesses to the contrary, that's exactly why the jury couldn't turn back a guilty verdict, because it just wasn't something they could pull off. They didn't believe he was guilty, Al.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, thanks for your call, brother. I appreciate you being an old school Levinite. So am I, by the way. Not only is he a mentor, but I've been a big fan of his for a long, long time. My kids grew up with Levin on in the car every afternoon when I pick them up from daycare and bring them home for dinner and whatnot. Sometimes dinner was in the car, so they were having their chicken nuggets in the back seat of my Ford while they were listening to Mark. And I'm grateful for those days. Al, thank you for your call, brother. Godspeed to you. Shout out to WENG, Arcadia, Florida. And let me see. Yeah, I'll do one more. We'll do one more right here. Let's go to Sarah, Bedford, Indiana. Go right ahead.
Hey, two things real quick. It was a godsend, quite literally, that Daniel Penny got acquitted. He did nothing wrong. I've grown up in New York, and believe me, those situations go real bad. And honestly, if both of them had been black or white, we wouldn't even hear about this. This is just a double-tiered justice that groups like Black Lives Matter want to push. And then
Sarah, before you make your point, I just want to say I think you're right. And you bring up something really good. I grew up in New York, too. And I can tell you, I remember I was a little kid when a guy named Bernard Goetz was carrying a gun on the subway because he was afraid for his life because people were getting jacked up on the subway. And a group, I think, of 3, 4, 5 guys trying to attack him. I don't remember all the details of the story, but he pulled out his gun and he shot him. And they died. And then they tried to put him in jail for murder, and he went to jail, right? He went to jail for a while. It took a while to resolve that whole situation. And they were like, he's a vigilante, and he's this, and he's that. But eventually, things got clarified. And this is the result of people having to arm themselves to be able to coexist in a community where people have normalized criminal behavior. And that's what New York was back in the 80s. And sadly, it's what progressive left-leaning Democrats are doing in big cities all across America, is normalizing crime. And this is a very bad thing, Sarah.
No, I agree. I grew up in Brooklyn. I was living in New York when the Bernie Getz case happened, and I can't tell you how many times that you would see someone getting humiliated by one of these packs of kids and utterly humiliate them, and that's if they were lucky. Then it would sometimes progress to just outright killing or beating or robbing. So Bernie Getz was completely right. I remember that. Wow. Yeah, he had Barry Slotnick to defend him, and they made the jury go into a typical subway car. I remember that. Like I still lived. I moved out of New York in '87, so that was my New York, man. I remember that.
Yeah, right. And that was honestly, as a kid, I remember that being a way bigger deal than this case. This case did not reach the Bernie Getz level of media attention, despite the reactions from the BLM people and whatnot. But go ahead. You were making a point about that.
No. I'll stick with that. I was going to talk about the CEO, but I think this is such a good thing. And that's the scary thing. That just tells you how far the left has gotten. They went after Bernie Getz, and honestly, he had a more tenuous case in the sense that he had a weapon, and the guys were obviously getting ready to jack him. But, and here Daniel Penny's unarmed and just tries to restrain the guy, which, happens on the subway. I've seen videos where somebody's menacing people and some guy puts them in a chokehold and the guy doesn't die. But the point is that they do the same thing. They just try to protect somebody. So it's kind of scary that Daniel Penny didn't even have a gun. And this guy had been repeatedly threatening people, get in their face, and he's going to kill somebody, not ready to go to jail. And he just tries to restrain him, and they're ready to nail him to the wall. It just tells you how bad the justice system, so-called justice system, has gotten, and how far left and crazy New York has gotten.
Yeah. And how bad the subways are. Sarah in Bedford, Indiana, WBIW, my fellow New Yorker, thank you so much. Godspeed to you. Folks are coming right back with the rest of your calls and more. Keep it locked right here. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, but I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, Feliz Navidad. We're back to the phones. I'm going to get your thoughts on what's going on in America tonight. Let's go to Frank, Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC. Frank, go for it, brother.
If Daniel Penny's case had not been highly publicized and he didn't have any charitable contributors to his legal defense, and he was just an ordinary citizen, how great do you think his legal fees would be, especially since he's being subject to a civil suit after the criminal trial?
Oh, yeah, easily a couple of $100,000. I mean, these guys, the good lawyers charge, I think, $450, $500 an hour. The top dog ones like Arthur Idala, who's been on this show, I don't know what he charges, but I'm sure Arthur can get $1,000 an hour easy. He was the guy who got Harvey Weinstein cleared on a technicality. I would imagine it would go up very, very quickly. And thankfully, Daniel Penny had an online fundraiser where he got $2.4 million in donations to pay his legal expenses. And I think that's great. Now, the money will pay for the attorney's fees for his current criminal case, as well as the civil cases that he's going to face down the road. And that's managed by his law firm, Reiser and Kenneth. Kenneth, by the way, Thomas Kenneth was supposed to be on the show tonight. Something happened where he wasn't able to join us, so hoping all is well with him. And, I think you're right, though. Had it happened to someone else who wasn't able to get it, or maybe someone that wasn't a Marine veteran and didn't have the support of the larger support group of Americans that supports, veterans and military folks, he may not have fared as well. right? Because he may not have gotten such a good attorney. It's important to note the attorney he got ran for district attorney in New York City, and was a solid candidate that was strongly considered. He's a very good lawyer. So kudos to him for his big win on this case. And if we're able to get him back on, we will. But it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, you've got to be able to be in the game. And so for some people, the legal fees alone keeps you out of the game.
So the average person would be wiser to just walk away from problems.
Yeah, you're right. It's incentivizing people from not doing the right thing as a good Samaritan. And I, for one, think we have to make sure that whatever systems we have in place encourage people to do the right thing. Because we're going so much further and further away, Frank. And I'm sure you see this as well. From when I was a kid, things were done a certain way. You spoke to people a certain way. There was a degree of decorum and respect you had for your own home, for your own parents, for your own family, for your neighbors, the elders in your life. And that seems to have fallen by the wayside, where there was this over casualization of interaction with children, even with parents, just over casualizing things to the point where their children call them by their first name. And they're like, I want to be their best friend. I think one of the worst things you could hear is that your kid is your best friend. I don't want to be my kid's best friend. I want to be my daughter's father. Right? That's the only job I've got. She can have other people that she can has as a best friend. Anyway, Frank, thank you, brother. I appreciate your call. Shout out to Cumberland, Maryland, WCBC in the building. And folks are coming right back with the speed round. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, on the phones, we go to Zanesville, Ohio, WHIZ. Let's go to Paul in Zanesville. Go for it, brother.
Hey, Rich, you know what? One of the first rules in combat is once you have somebody subdued, you don't let them go until the situation is secured. And that's exactly what that man done. The man did not die in his hands. The man died in, I don't know if it was a paramedics or hospital or whatever. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's the way it goes. I feel for the family and everything, but he was acting very erratic. Now, with Trump and that Walker lady, I'd like to take one of those things that you put in your hands, got the big, what do you call it? I know what those things are. Got a big paddle, and we like smack them with it, because I watched that. and Trump, Trump destroyed her.
He did, and he killed her with kindness.
Yes, he did.
Oh, man. You're right, Paul. Thanks for the call. Tony in Montreal, shout out to you, brother. And folks, we're coming right back to you tomorrow, God willing. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.